in terms of the process of getting the DMT study off the ground, yeah, I had, thought long and hard about how to do a DMT study. And actually, I had spent a couple of days with Terence McKenna at his house, and we sort of were strategizing together about it. And we just sort of concluded that we should just, ask the government to give me permission to give DMT to people and see what happened, which seemed like a pretty reasonable request. And instead of saying I wanted to give DMT because it's a dangerous drug, no, let me backtrack. So instead of saying I wanted to give DMT because it was an interesting, amazing, terrifically fascinating drug, I just decided to approach it from the perspective that I believe the government would be more inclined to support, which is that DMT is a dangerous drug. But it was the exact same study, at least in the beginning, which is let's give DMT to people and let's see what it does and let's try and figure out how it does it. And so it would be the exact same study pretty much as if it were a dangerous or a beneficial or potentially beneficial drug. So I began with the kind of model I had been trained in, which was a psychopharmacological model. And when you're looking at any new drug or any drug you're interested in investigating, what you do is develop some dose response data. You give small doses of the drug, you give medium doses of the drug, and you give high doses of the drug. So in this case, I sort of painted a picture of giving low doses of DMT and medium and high doses of DMT. And then to measure as many possible parameters, both biological and psychological, as I could. And since at the time and still currently people think psychedelics are working on serotonin receptors in the brain, I suggested that we draw a number of, that we study the levels in blood of a number of hormones that were presumably under the control of the serotonin system, cortisol, beta endorphin, prolactin, those kinds of things. And also take a look at pupil diameter, which is under serotonin control, blood pressure, temperature, heart rate. Like a whole biological sort of battery of response criteria. And if indeed serotonin was involved with the way, if serotonin was behind the mechanisms of DMT, then you'd think a small amount of DMT would increase those variables, a little amount in medium doses of DMT, and so on. And also I was very interested, well, actually a lot more interested in the psychological effects. And so I interviewed a number of DMT smokers, friends or friends of friends, in order to get sort of a sense of what I was going to be hearing about. It's very curious, this whole entity thing, this whole contact with these DMT beings. I'd say pretty much everybody that I interviewed in that preliminary manner in sort of developing the rough draft of my rating scale talked about DMT entities. And I even included that in the questionnaire. And I had my own experience. I still was not prepared for the frequency with which I heard people describe contact with beings. And even when I was working on my book, I still had forgotten about the frequency of these reports. It's like the mind was rebelling, or at least from my point of view, my mind was rebelling against just how common a phenomenon it was. But still, in terms of how we were going to measure the effects of DMT, we had the biological ones. and the psychological ones is quantified with a paper and pencil sort of test that people would answer after they came down. And I organized that rating scale, based on the principles of Buddhist psychology that I had learned about, previously. I lumped questions or categorized them, even though they're all kind of mixed up in the questionnaire. Um, in terms of those categories of perceptual effects and physical effects and cognitive effects, just a handful of categories, and each of the questions could be sort of thrown into one or the other of the bins. Um, and also an important element was being able to measure the amount of DMT in the blood as a result of giving the drug. So we had to look around to find somebody who was able to measure levels of DMT after we were going to be injecting it. So we found a group in New Jersey that was able to measure DMT, and we spoke to them and learned the way of measuring it ourselves, and we're then able, to measure resulting levels after we injected it.